Hello, Deca members. My name is Sarah Sunny, and I am your Texas Deca District 7 president. And welcome back to another episode of Spotlights with Sarah. So I'm going to let our next guest go ahead and introduce herself. So if you can go ahead, say your name, grade, how many years you've been in Deca, and obviously your officer position.
Yeah, I would love to. Hi, my name is Janhavi Mehta. I am a senior in high school this year, so I have been in DECA since my freshman year, all 4 years, and I am the Arizona DECA District 2 representative.
So we were previously just talking about this, kind of how association officers deal with so many different kind of spinning plates per se, that it can be a lot sometimes. But what I love to see is how every single leader in DECA is always striving to be the best that they can be, regardless of any other thing that's going on. And we kind of try to put our best foot forward per se, just, to when you meet a new member, even though there's a million different things that are kind of going on in your brain at once, the ability to kind of simplify that into talking to that member and what they're asking is kind of a different thing to have to learn and backtrack from all the knowledge that you might have already gained from 4 years in DECA to simplifying it for somebody who has never heard any of this before. So do you have anything to kind of say about that experience?
Yeah, so actually just last week on Thursday, we had our Arizona DECA Fall Leadership Conference. And one of my favorite parts, not of just being an association officer, but of being in DECA in general, has been meeting new people, getting to talk to them, getting to tell them why I love DECA, why I'm still here after 4 years. So that's been a really cool experience to have, but to kind of shut everything else off, everything else that's going on in my brain is definitely a challenge. But when you really love what you do, when you love DECA completely, it's really rewarding to be able to kind of flick that switch into my DECA mindset.
Mm-hmm. And that idea of a DECA mindset is one that I kind of associate with not only leadership, but with kind of the main pillars on which DECA stands for, with teamwork, integrity, competence, and all of those different kind of ideals. And while they seem like really kind of broad terms, when you think about that, the idea is to be able to prepare yourself for anything that you might do in the future, not just college, not just whatever school you're going to go to, what job you may pursue, but just day-to-day experiences that you experience as a young adult and just as an adult in the real world. So that idea of working with a team, leading a team, but just communication, how do you disassociate negative emotions at times that most likely don't even come from DECA, but just from school or something that's going on in your own household, and prepare yourself to put on not a face, but to just try to think of the positives in a situation. So, kind of what has that kind of been like, the idea of switching it?
So I will be perfectly honest, hasn't been easy.
Mm-hmm.
When you have so many things going on. Honestly, senior year has been a little bit stressful, but just the idea of what DECA is, for me, it's been getting to meet people, getting to share with these people something I'm so passionate about and something I know they're equally passionate about. So kind of just finding that mutual love with everyone around me at any DECA conference or in a call or when I go and do a chapter visit. That's what really makes flipping that switch so much easier every time.
So we kind of jumped into the deep stuff, but go ahead and tell me about your actual DECA journey. So you mentioned that you started as a freshman in high school, and every single person, not even just from a different association, but from different chapters all around the globe and the country, experience different things. So what were some struggles that you faced besides kind of the time management stress of it all? And what were kind of your highs in DECA as well as the journey itself that you've been on?
So yeah, like you said, I've been in DECA since my freshman year, and I feel like it's grown with me as much as I've grown with DECA. I've been involved in a ton of things, marching band, DECA, synchronized swimming, throughout my 4 years in high school, but nothing has shaped me. Nothing has kind of beat me down and built me back up like DECA has. I've faced losses with DECA. I've faced really tough projects, and none of that has been easy. But my advisor, my chapter, all the incredible people that I've been surrounded with since my freshman year that I've been able to look up to and grow with have really shaped my journey and made it into the organization that I love so much.
Mm-hmm. And what event do you compete in, or have you switched around?
I've done a little bit of switching around. I've competed in human resources management, and I got first place in that last year. My sophomore year, I competed in business law and ethics team decision making with an incredible role play partner, and we got second place at state conference. And then I also did a written project last year, an entrepreneurship franchise business plan. So a little bit of switching around, but it's kind of given me the chance to really explore a lot of different aspects of DECA and a lot of different types of competition.
Right.
I find really fascinating.
And we were talking about this in the last Spotlights with Sarah, the idea of with switching events, you have to be very adaptable to different scenarios. And it's a little bit easier when, if I continuously compete in startup, I'm not necessarily doing the same thing every single year. So I have the ability to try different things. But when you're switching from human resources to, for instance, something like franchise, you have to be able to kind of adapt to whatever guidelines that a new event kind of brings up. And it has its own kind of merit to continuously switching. And I know a lot of us try to stay kind of comfortable within our own events, and some will decide to venture off and try different things. But I know a lot of new members have asked me the question, do I stick with one for all 4 years? Do I switch it? And it's really about how you decide to look at what you're going to pursue. So if you're more interested in trying new things, trying to build that idea of adapting and experiencing a wide variety of different career interests, but also just topics that are involved, maybe switching is a better option for you. And if you can pick it up fast, that's great. Whereas if you want the innovativeness of it, having something different from year to year, but also staying in a relatively similar format, a written event that allows you to kind of create your own idea may be better for you. So I always like to ask kind of that perspective on switching versus not switching. And you've switched, but what are you doing this year? Because I think you mentioned 3 events.
So actually last year when I double competed last year. So I did human resources management and franchise business plan at the same time. I went back. I did human resources my freshman year, kind of skipped over it sophomore year and went back to it in addition to my written my junior year. So I'm thinking of doing something similar, another written and human resources management this year. So I don't have as much experience with the switching around between a role play and a written in different years. I did mine at the same time, and I think that comes with its own challenges. But on the idea of switching, I think something that I found really important about DECA, and that I know from talking to people that so many people love about DECA, is if you want to go down one path, you totally can. But it gives you the opportunity to explore. And I think for people who really don't know what it is that they want to do, switching through DECA, because they're not super different. The key indicators, basic ideas behind everything, every competitive event in DECA is pretty similar. So switching in DECA, of course, it's challenging because it's something new, but I think it's totally doable and actually a really great option to explore everything that DECA has to offer.
The idea of competing in multiple events is a really easy way to see the stark differences between events kind of side by side and determine early on some people will stick with doing the 2 event system because it works for them and they like a balanced type of competitive lifestyle, whereas you have the possibility to change so much but gain so many different types of skills, which I know we market some of the bigger ones such as presentations and having those soft skill components, but also the knowledge-based component of DECA is very, very prominent. As while business related terms are obviously in every single event, going from financing to automotive services are 2 very different knowledge kind of areas. So I just kind of thought, because we're at the beginning of the year, to put some of the event information out there. But as for conducting what's best for you as a competitor, talk to your chapter officer team, talk to your advisor, because those people have firsthand experience with competing as well, and they'll be way more accessible to continuously ask questions about what you want to do in DECA. So next up, what is it like kind of being an association officer in real life? So other than the complications that come from sometimes with time management, what's the experience? What has the experience been so far for you as an association officer?
It's been so exciting. It's been so much fun, and it's made me into almost a new person. The way Arizona DECA does things, we have a lot of events back to back, starting with camp all the way up to FLC, which is our fall leadership conference. But it's been so rewarding to start building those relationships as a state officer, getting to meet people and getting to hear about an organization that I'm so passionate about, that I love so much, and getting to hear firsthand from so many members as to why they love it too. Mm-hmm. And I feel like even with all the time management struggles, that's what makes it worth it. I just did a chapter visit yesterday where I got to go to a school. I got to talk to all of the different marketing classes that they had. And I got to hear why people are interested by DECA, why they want to join, and kind of be that inspiration for people to explore something new that they might not have even thought about. So it's been so rewarding in that.
I think the payoff of being in any leadership position in DECA is truly being able to see the impact of your actions, but also anything that you've tried to implement into an association, a district, a chapter, and whatever capacity that might be in. I think sometimes when we're working on projects, we become, for DECA specifically as leader, we sometimes become very unaware of what the response is, not because we're not looking for a response, but because we spent so much time working towards a goal that it takes us a second to step back and see that I've been successful. Or is there something that I have to change? And the idea of talking to members and directly seeing that, okay, what I'm saying is translating. They're understanding why this organization is really going to help them in every possible way, is probably the most satisfying and kind of happy moment that you have in DECA. Because really specifically, whenever I've spoken to chapters, or even if it was just one member or a freshman that would never even have thought about joining DECA, seeing that little spark in their eyes and they're like, okay, I think I'm going to sign up. I'm going to come to the first meeting. That's always my favorite moment. But more than going to a conference, more than being on stage, whatever it may be, but just knowing that somebody else is going to love an organization in this, what I really call as a family, as people will say, the DECA family, it becomes more about that rather than the idea of going for the competitions, which are still so important. But at the heart of it all, we've really, and I'm so proud that we've had the ability to make this about community and make it about family. But at this point in time, DECA is first and foremost a family, a community, and then everything else comes after.
No, I completely agree. Being an association officer has honestly changed my perspective on DECA as a whole, but it's also changed my perspective a little bit on being part of a DECA chapter at my school. Mm-hmm. I've gotten the chance to meet members from all over Arizona DECA, but it's given me kind of a different perspective on the first DECA family I had, right. my chapter at my school, being able to see the passion and knowing that I was there once too, and how DECA has changed me and how I can help. I can be that impactful person that I had as a freshman in that association officer role. It changes your mindset on DECA as a whole and that family that you have.
I think your chapter is always going to hold a special place in your heart because you spend the most amount of time with those people. They were kind of the first people to hype you up. I mean, I know for a fact that my chapter officer team were the first people to say you should run for district office, and were the first people to say congratulations. And they were the people recording me at conferences and cheering me on when I won. And that's not to say that other officer teams don't do that, but they're the first people that do it for you. And that leaves an impact on you, because if I didn't have that strong relationship with my chapter officer team, but also just the members that are there, I don't know if I would be that confident in Deca. I don't know if I would have the ability to say I'm doing good if I didn't have that first kind of backbone of support from my chapter. So sometimes you remember that where you started and how far you've come, it's been a long journey and whatever, and you're a senior, so you know it's been a long journey. I still have one more year left, but that idea it's really special because I'll be looking at old pictures from my freshman year of high school, which unfortunately was a virtual competition, but the way that we were still able to make it fun, exciting, still do things together, still hop on Zoom calls where we were clapping and laughing and crying all together is my favorite part. And it still goes back to the whole idea of community.
Yeah, I love my state officer team so much. They're all an incredible, passionate group of people, and we are all so supportive of each other. But there is something so special about your first chapter officer team, or that first group of people that you met in Deca, the senior class that has been in Deca with me for 4 years that I've grown up with. I remember being at that first Deca conference my freshman year, that first state conference, getting to be in the audience with them while everyone was getting called up for awards. Those experiences and that family sticks with you no matter where you are.
Yeah. So you already kind of mentioned this, but if you want to speak some more on it, the events that you've competed in, but also accolades and kind of tips. So just a little bit more in depth, as in how did you come from one event to the next, to qualifying, to state, and all of those different steps?
Yeah, so the categories I've been in, they have been honestly a little bit random. I remember my freshman year kind of taking a business management test, taking a hospitality test, taking a finance test, and I was not good at finance tests my freshman year. I knew that, but business management was kind of a category that I really grasped onto. I did well on the tests, and I knew that I would be setting myself up for success in business management. And I think that was a really important lesson that I learned is I want to grow. I always want to grow, but knowing your strengths and knowing your weaknesses. I knew that if I competed in a finance event, yes, I would learn, but it would be a struggle.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I wasn't going to do well. So knowing that finance isn't my strength, I can continue to learn this, but knowing what I'm good at was really, really important for me. And I had great people to tell me that and to kind of teach me that lesson. So I found human resources management because it was one of the few individual business management events.
Mm-hmm.
And the first time I saw that role play, the first time I read it, I loved the content. I loved the scenario, the performance indicators, they just made sense to me. And so I feel like it was almost love at first sight with that category. And I fell right into it. My sophomore year, when I competed in business law and ethics, team decision making, it was with another officer on my chapter officer team. And we really both connected. She was also in business management. So it kind of made sense for us to try out a team event together.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't know if it was going to work, but we thought, why not? And I think that was another really important lesson is always be willing to take that risk.
Right.
We worked really well together in an officer team, but competing in a team event, I'm sure you had partners on your written this past year. Competing together is a completely different building.
Yeah.
You can be really great in an individual event, but it's a whole different experience.
And on that note, it is truly about team chemistry. And sounds weird, but it's the same thing as if you were dating somebody. You have to be able to sound good together. If I'm yelling at my partner the entire time while we're presenting, we're not going anywhere. Now, say it's not even that blatantly obvious that you guys just don't mesh well as a team. Handoffs are kind of what I consider to be the most important part of doing any sort of team presentation, whether that be for competition, but also as an officer team. Whenever at the Texas Deca Leadership Summit, which was to train district officers, we were required to kind of introduce our program of leadership, some community service ideas. Quick turnaround, wasn't a very prepared speech by any mean, but I still had to hand it off to my VPs. I had to make sure that there was a cohesiveness kind of in that environment while we were presenting. And it sounds so much cleaner. And the biggest thing, it just tips the next person who's about to speak. So team chemistry is kind of something I've been very grateful to have with my group. And again, I've said this multiple times, my team is very random. I don't know how it happens sometimes, but it worked. So we just kind of know our own strengths and weaknesses. And as you were speaking about, so one of my teammates is very, very good at, well, I guess she wasn't, she learned how to do it. Her family has a lot of background in finance. She was not necessarily the strongest, not that she was weak, but she didn't know the terminology, the calculations initially, but she learned about it. And now she's amazing at it, even if she doesn't love it sometimes because there's a lot of numbers involved. And then we have another one who's really, really great at researching and making sure that problem solutions, those type of things are strong and tight. I tend to be the person who can think on my feet and while people say that doesn't exist in prepared events, it absolutely does. Questions, 100%, it's all off your feet. So I usually lead in with a question, usually answer it first, maybe pass it off to somebody else afterwards. But also if any one of us messes up, we're able to pick up on where the other left off. That's the security of having a team, but you have to make sure that the team is being active and listening while presenting and that you guys are understanding each other. Because without that, you're not going to be able to be successful. So maybe you should do an individual event. But go ahead, speak more about that kind of team experience from your perspective.
Yeah, so when I competed in business law and ethics team decision making with my partner, there was also another team at our chapter that was competing in that event. And those two, they were best friends and they had been for years. So they kind of had a flow. They knew how to bounce off of each other. My partner and I were friends, but we didn't really have that flow initially. We didn't finish each other's sentences. We didn't complete each other's thoughts. We had to find that balance. And for a little bit, it was a struggle, but we knew that we were two people who did really well with structure. That was one of our strengths as a team, was that we could do really well if we structured our presentation. Right. And it was still, of course, thinking off the top of our heads, but having that little structure. So for each indicator, she does this part of the indicator, and then I do this part. Then for the next one, we switch. But we had that structure. We knew what each person was going to do so that we could bounce off each other. We could complete each other's thoughts, but in a way that made sense to both of us so that our presentation was more successful. So really finding that dynamic, finding how we worked not only together, but as individuals so that we could be successful together.
And as for your success in competition, what has that kind of been like, the idea of actual competition, going to a conference, being prepared, those type of tips?
So at my last state conference, it was a little hectic. I was competing with a written or role play and running for state officer at the same time. But practice, practice, practice. I knew that I didn't have to worry about my presentation and my role play as much because I had practiced. I knew what I was doing and I had people that could support me throughout the entire conference. That our state conference weekend is so stressful for everyone because everyone wants to win. Everyone's working really hard at whatever competitive event they're doing. So finding that group of people that I could lean on and that could support me and listen to me practice, who I could listen to practice, we could bounce ideas off of each other at that conference was really helpful. And I think that's gotten me through a lot of my DECA conferences. Yeah. So.
That 100%. I know that when I was running for office, for district office, I would not have been able to if I didn't have some of those key chapter officer members, because I relied on them. When I believe my competitive event got pushed a little bit later, last minute. Just, it happens obviously time to time with larger places. The fact that we have over 3,000 members in D7 and there was a lot of judges in need. So my event had got pushed. I also had my interview to do at conference. So I was a little bit stressed, to say the least. It was kind of feeling like I was running up and down stairs, going everywhere. And then there was my campaign booth and I didn't know who was at my table. So I remember I had group meet one of my officers, and I was like, hey, can you help me out? And every single person was there to help me really succeed. And the idea of the fact that I wasn't necessarily stressed on an actual presentation because I had practiced, but it was more about the idea of getting from place to place. So just knowing that I had people to rely on is incredible, because I've seen pictures behind the scene where I saw some of my friends talking to members about my campaign goals. And it meant a lot that they paid attention when I told them about it, that they knew what to tell others. So that was really, really special. And although it was a hectic day, it was probably one that I will cherish for very, very many years, because of the idea of just having so many people to help me out. And again, the idea of when you do get that position, I'm sure your teammates were very, very happy for you. That's probably, I think actually my ear was drawn to the very left side because I heard them, whereas standing in the middle, but I heard them from a mile away, and I was very emotional that day. So for sure, those are very, very good tips. So what are your funniest moments in Deca? And as I said time and time again, I did start out with fun. So if you have one other than ICDC, feel free to talk about it, because we can talk about ICDC for hours. But what is your funniest moment?
Yeah, so we definitely could talk about ICDC for hours on end. It was an incredible experience. It was so much fun. But I think one of the most fun memories I have is one from this year at our officer training camp at the end of August. Our state officer team went up to a campsite. It was a gorgeous campsite, and all the officer teams from the chapters around the state joined us, and we got to learn and grow together. But we did it in color teams. So all 8 of us, we dressed up in different color gear. My color was yellow, so I dressed up as a minion. The socks, the gold beads, everything. One of our other state officers was in purple, and she had a cape and face paint. And I think just seeing a state officer team that is known to be so professional kind of let loose and have that fun together while still being those professional state officers and helping everyone else grow while growing with them was so much fun the whole weekend.
That's a great memory. So as we're running out of time here, the last thing that I will ask you is, what is your kind of biggest piece of advice that you would give to any Deca member, your parting words with them?
I would say that you get out of Deca what you put into it. Deca has so much to offer, not just in competition, but through leadership, through meeting people, through the networking. So if you give Deca your all, you will get so much out of it. What you put into Deca, the work you put in, the time you put in, it will be worth it if you love what you're doing.
Absolutely. That is a fantastic piece of advice to end this episode of Spotlights with Sarah. This is episode 7, everyone. So we are slowly making it to the number 10 mark. And I will see you guys in the next one. I'll keep her on here for just a second here, but have a great day.